All right, 5:35. I love starting on time. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about today. I think it's going to be a wonderful session. I even have my both dogs joining me in the office today, so the luck is all there. I just want to point out a few things before we get started. If you go to the OG Accelerator website at thekaufman.com, we have the videos of the first two sessions. You can see the links there to watch them. It takes a couple days to get the link and get it re-uploaded to YouTube. So most likely by Monday, because of the holiday, we should have today's session uploaded. So be sure to check that out. And there's also resources as they come up during the session that people commented on. We will put those in there for you to check out. I also have a downloadable business model canvas that you're welcome to use. In fact, I'd love it if you do. And a new document called the Archetype Customer, which we are going to get in at the end of my part today. I do want to say, if anyone has questions throughout the program, we have this cool Q&A button, so feel free to load that up. And I think at the end of certain parts, we'll ask if there's time, if anyone does have questions, and we'll be able to do that. And of course, we'll make time at the very end of the program. And the only last thing is I want to just throw a quick thank you to my friend and partner on this program, Ari, for all your awesome work in putting these incredible guests like we have today into the program and really bringing a level of knowledge as far as the cannabis world and business to this program. So thank you, my friend.
Oh, Eric, it is a pleasure to be back with you. I don't know what we're going to be doing on Tuesday nights when this program is over. We're going to have to figure that out. But I'm really excited about tonight's program. I'm excited for the business canvas model, you going deeper into that. And then we have three wonderful guests. We have a representative from Local 338, a UFCW union. There's a labor peace agreement requirement as part of the cannabis application process. Really important that folks understand that the cannabis entrepreneurs are aware of that technical requirement. And then we have two amazing speakers from Curaleaf who will be talking, the head of retail and the head of marketing at Curaleaf, really one of the largest cannabis companies in the United States, if not the world. So I'm really looking forward to those conversations and learning more about those two areas with them.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. Speaking of which, if you don't know, this is the building that is behind the website. This is the Kaufman Incubator. We are located in Broome County, New York. It's the Valley of Innovation. If you didn't know, it's actually the home of IBM as well as the birthplace of virtual reality. Very cool stuff. We opened in April of 2017, currently have 65 startup members. 10 of them international. I think actually that might be 11 now. We just brought in a company that was actually nominated for an Emmy. Very cool stuff. And since our opening, our companies in total have raised 118 million. So very, very impressive folks have found their way to the Kaufman. And if you're interested in learning more, please feel free to drop a line at thekaufman.com. Oh, there it is. There's me again. I am Eric Krohn. I'm the Director of Business Incubation Programming for Binghamton University, as well as the Kaufman Incubator. I am a lover of what we call the business model canvas, and I was lucky enough to take a master class with the folks that made the BMC. They have their own company called Strategizer, which you might see on some of the documents throughout my presentation. I've been lucky enough to speak nationally and internationally to different startups and research groups on the BMC. I I find my interest in this world because a long time ago, I did start our area's first CBD company. I have since exited anything involving cannabis so that I feel I can mentor neutrally. And I get my background, I'm actually, as Ari mentioned, went to the Culinary Institute of America, absolutely life-changing. Later, actually became a clinical dietitian where I spent many years in geriatrics and then running health programs throughout New York State for folks living with HIV or AIDS. And somehow through all of that, probably by not sleeping, I've wrote some patents, and that's essentially how I find myself here today. So enough about me. That's not why you're here. We are going to talk about customer segments and value propositions. This is the most important aspect of any business, I believe, even though you really need all the aspects of the business model canvas, but you don't have a business if you don't have customers. And certainly these two segments receive the most amount of time when it comes to classroom learning about the business model canvas, just because it really is, it's a lot of psychology, but we're gonna kind of check that out here. What we're trying to figure out is, are you selling something people are asking for, right? That's what it comes down to. But as you will see as we go through this, it's a lot more difficult to really know if you are selling what people are asking for, or to just figure it out what people really want. What are they asking for? What is their desire? So here it is. Here's the business model canvas. And last week we talked about the theater of the BMC and discussed the back of the house of the theater. And today we are going to discuss the front of the house. So this is what the customer sees from the company. Yes, there are 4 sections: customer relationships and channels. I'm going to kind of go over a definition of those, but for the sake of spending more time on value propositions and customer segments, we're really going to focus on those two. So just to, again, get it to mention channels and relationships, this is basically, how does the company communicate with its customers, and how does it actually physically or digitally deliver what it needs to our customers. So channels, I think we can understand, and I think really some of the folks on the second half of the program certainly will be able to get more into that. But customer relationships, in my opinion, is one of the more interesting of the segments, and certainly the hardest of them all. And really, that's what prevents your customers from going to another company. So there's lots of techniques like subscriptions or prepays, or when you go to the coffee shop and you get, your 9 cups of coffee, your 10th one is free. That's a customer relationship. It's these small techniques that get you to keep coming back. But again, you won't get the chance to even talk about channels or relationships unless you have customers, which is why I'm going to spend the rest of the time really talking about customer segments and value propositions. Customer segments, they are very specific people that belong to a homogeneous group. So you or any company will never sell to everybody. That's just not a thing. I talk to so many startups, and you ask them, who are they going to sell to? Well, everybody. Everybody wants this. Not usually how it works out. So what we have to do is really use the scientific method to try to figure out who our archetype customer is. And that's going to be one of our key words for today. And then we have this term value propositions. Well, that's the value that your customer is seeking and you provide to them. So it's kind of silly, but I always like to use the example of a paperclip when it comes to value propositions. And I like to ask the startups I work with, why do people buy paper clips? Well, often the answer is, well, it keeps your papers together, Eric. Come on, that's dumb. Well, I would challenge that. I think that's an action, but people buy paper clips or use paper clips so that they don't embarrass themselves when they walk in the room and the papers go all over the place, or maybe they don't get fired or mess up their speech because now their papers are got all scattered and dirty and it's just embarrassing. It's those are the reasons people buy paper clips. It's not necessarily just, well, it holds paper together. That's an action. What we have to do is really think about what is the psychology, what is the job that someone's trying to do that gives them that desire for a value. And I love bringing this one up. This picture of a tincture bottle always kind of makes me laugh, mostly because that was what my CBD company did so many years ago. But I have spent years working with people in the CBD sector. And as startups, this is what everybody wants to make: CBD in a little jar. And the problem with that is everyone's doing it. And why? I mean, it's okay, you're going to put your cool label on it, but everybody makes tincture, and inside the bottle, it's practically the same stuff. So what I try to do is talk to people and say, well, what do people really want? Why do they want it? And how do they want it? And so I challenge everyone here as they think about what they want to do as they enter the cannabis world. Think of a specific person and group that you want to make something for, and then try to find out, well, what are they trying to get done? Yeah, Ari, please.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right, Eric. And last week we had a great presentation from another Eric Greenbaum, who took us through kind of the cultivation and processing parts of the supply chain. And tonight we're going to do retail. But I think there are opportunities to take this methodology as a cultivator or processor, and to say, what type of products do I want to make, and who are they going to appeal to? It could be flour. It could be edibles, it could be topicals, it could be vaporization cartridges, it could be subcategories of edibles, it could be chocolates, it could be candies. I mean, there's so many different SKUs, there's so many different products that appeal to different customer segments when you're at the part of the supply chain, when you're creating the product. And then even on the retail front, you need to decide, what product are you taking inventory? What are you selling? What type of services are you providing? So I think this is exactly the right conversation to have, even though people on the Zoom, some folks may be interested more in the retail side. Some people may be on the manufacturing side. When I say manufacturing, I mean cultivation or processing. But I think it's really applicable to people regardless of where they are in the supply chain.
Yep, totally agree. Awesome. Thank you, Ari. And basically, and this is not my quote, I believe this is David Bland, one of the geniuses behind a lot of business theory. Our customers do not exist to buy. We, as companies, exist for them, right? So what we learned along, I think maybe 20 or 30 years ago, was this idea of build it and they will buy it wasn't working. We were just making things and then doing our best to sell them to people or market it to people. And it just doesn't work out. And what we were seeing was all these giant investments were going to waste. And we made a fundamental change. And it's a very interesting change you have to make mentally as you think about creating your business. We need to listen to what people are asking for, what they desire, what will fix their pain. And then we make a company offering that. So we exist for them. They're not here to buy from us. But it's about to get way more complicated because there's 6 different types of customers, and we have to understand who we're talking to, or who's coming into our store, or who we're marketing to. So I think for us, we can maybe presume that's 19 and older, maybe 18 and older, just for the cannabis sake. But there is these 6 different types of customers that all respond very differently to your marketing or your product. So I'm going to go over some of these quickly here. I'm just going to make sure we're still on time. The end user, I think we can all understand that. That's basically who's going to end up using that product in the end. That does not mean that they're always going to be the person that buys the product. They're just the end user. Sometimes they are, but not always. Sometimes there's a decision maker that's behind it. You know, think about someone that might be trying to take care of someone in pain who's looking for cannabis products, and they might be the decision maker on trying something that might be a progressive medicine, if you will. And there's also an economic buyer. So perhaps you're making a product that you want to sell B2B from your business to another business. Well, the person you're talking with, perhaps at first, may not actually be the person that writes the check. And you need to make sure that you are basically sending the right messages or reaching the right people, so that the person that does write the check in the end for your product is going to actually do that for you. And these 3 buyers, if you will, can be very different. But then there's 3 more that we also have to consider. There's one that's called the influencer. So maybe this is just someone that once you get to them to believe in your product so much that they go to a coworker, a colleague, or a family member and say, look, you really got to try this. I talked to this person, I read the literature, I think it's a great product. That's an influencer. Or even a recommender. This could be someone within an organization that said, hey, look, I trust this company. They have a great trajectory, good social media. I think we should partner with them. And then lastly, and I think I think this is one of the more interesting types of customers, we have the saboteur. So this is someone that does not want you to sell your product to their company. But I want to give you a little hint about this. Yes, we should recognize that, because a lot of people can smile and listen to our story, but perhaps they're really thinking, no way do I want to buy this from you. But working with one of our startups, we were able to identify that someone they had spoken to was in fact a saboteur. And what we were able to learn from them was actually a lot of the language and the fears that they have, that as someone selling a product, you can then understand, oh, well, this is what they're afraid of, so I need to address that. So there's always something you can learn, even from people that may not want you to succeed. Ari, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just want to make a comment, and I believe that most of our participants this evening and in the program are focused on the adult use markets. But having spent several years in the medical cannabis market, the influencers and recommenders that we would focus a tremendous amount of effort on were physicians and other healthcare practitioners who were allowed to recommend cannabis to their patients. And that was a very important and effective marketing technique because people do trust their doctors. People do trust their healthcare practitioners. For adult use, they're likely to be different influencers and different recommenders, but totally agree that whatever business you are in, there are influencers and there are recommenders, and it's going to really important to figure out who those people are.
Yeah, great. Again, brilliant inside knowledge. I love it. Thank you. So if I were to say, what is this? I guess the image is not perfectly clear, but that is a VR headset. Hopefully I'm even using the modern terms. So if I were to say, who's going to use this? Who buys the VR headset? What kind of customer is my customer if I'm a VR headset manufacturer? Well, maybe this is a customer. This could be an end user. Probably not the financial buyer, but maybe the end user, maybe the influencer. Hey. Or maybe it's the parents. Maybe the parents are like, hey, we got to get this thing. Yeah, you can have one too, little person, but we want to do some voyages through VR because maybe people aren't doing the cruise ships. Or maybe the story is grandma just wanted to talk to the whole family and someone suggested VR. But my point is, you never know who your customers are. You really have to study them and know what type of customer am I really talking to, or am I designing my marketing or branding towards? And the term that we use is archetype. So boom, 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 like if little bells could go off when we use a fancy word, that's the type of customer as a startup we need to focus on. So when I say archetype customer, what I'm talking about is a complete study and breakdown of a human being. It's crazy. I always talk to the startups and say, look, I want to be able to walk into a crowded room of people and know immediately which one is your archetype customer, because you've already studied this customer so well that I know exactly what they might look like. And I don't, mean that to necessarily be color or anything, but, here we have Kayla, and she has a certain look. And a lot of times the way people dress might relate to the packaging or flavors or sales techniques that we need to use with them. But we have to understand so much about who our customer is, what they're trying to get done in the course of the day. How are they trying to do it? What have they tried in the past to do it? What goals do they have, or what good comes out of them accomplishing what jobs they have to do in the day? And when we really understand who this archetype person is, then we can really form a marketing strategy or a sales strategy focused solely on this archetype. So some of the questions that kind of go into how do we, define this is, who are they? What are their position or title, age, sex, role? How do they buy? Do they want to buy online? Do they buy in person? Do they use credit cards, cash, coupons? There's all sorts of things. What matters to them? What motivates them? I always love it. And I think it was perhaps one of my colleagues, Tony Frontera, that used the story. But why do people buy coffee at a coffee place on their way to work in the morning? Most likely the answer isn't really, I like the flavor. It's usually reasons, I didn't have time in the morning at home because I was doing A, B, C, and D, and I need to be awake when I get to work so that I don't fall behind. And it's these sort of emotional things that are behind the actions that really give us an understanding of what and how we need to sell to our customers. But you're probably saying, why is this important, Erica? This sounds like we have to do this whole FBI study of who we're going to be selling our products to. Well, as a startup, you kind of do. So most people think that they're going to start selling to whoever they, dreamed would be their ultimate customer. Perhaps it's I'm making these glass pipes and I think it's going to be absolutely awesome for this group of people. But unfortunately, customer adoption is a bell curve, and you're starting here with the innovators. The innovators are an interesting group. This is not who you might think would be your main customer. In fact, it's not going to be your main customer if you survive as a company, because it's only the first 2.5% of your customers. But these are the people that end up buying your product for perhaps a selfish reason. Maybe they want to look cool, or maybe they're driven to have certain strains no one's ever had before. But They're not doing it because they saw other people enjoying it. They're not doing it because it was cheap. Usually these people end up paying the most for the products because there isn't a large supply. But what we have to do is figure out who they are. This is our archetype customer. We cannot start a business and then just sell to everybody. It never works. You can't do it. You really need to figure out who you want to sell to and why they would want to buy from you. So Strategizer, again, the folks that made the business model canvas, has this cool little tool or exercise. I just wanted to run through it really quick to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So this is just a fun way to kind of summarize some key points or understandings of your product and what it offers your customers. We can get much more intense in this, but I will run out of time if I do. So here we go. Our THC infused hand cream helps those with arthritic hands who want to continue working by reducing pain or discomfort. I want to say if our lawyer for the CBD company saw that word pain up there, he would be screaming at right now. You can't say that. Discomfort relieves discomfort. Anyways, talk to your own team about that. So reducing pain or discomfort and increasing dexterity, unlike aspirin or Tylenol. And the reason I like this is because perhaps if I made this THC infused hand cream, we might think, oh, everybody would want to use this. But no, I chose a specific market segment that has a desire for something that can help them keep working. Because you know what? When people get to continue working, they feel good. They have meaning. It's something they want to do, and they don't want age to stop them from that. And I can prevent those sort of negative emotions in my customers by providing them what they desire, THC infused hand cream. And so this is what I'm talking about when we say we really need to know our customers. So a great quote here from Maria: being truly customer centric means having a deep understanding of your customers' unmet needs. Perhaps this photo isn't too fitting for this seminar, but it's just so cute. I mean, come on, I couldn't take it out. So in my last 6 minutes, I'm probably gonna burn through this a little bit quick, but normally we save some of these lessons on value propositions for much more intense lectures, but I really wanna give you folks everything I got. And if you're still interested in unwrapping this, then you can certainly go learn more from the BMC or contact the Kaufman. But let's get into this. Customers have pains, and we need to describe what outcomes or obstacles related to their jobs that could go wrong. So like the person that gets the coffee on their way to work, the pain is if they show up to work completely lethargic and unproductive, they might get fired, or people might say they're not holding their own at work. So that's a reason someone might need a cure for that. But they also have gains. I mean, come on. If I had a cup of coffee and boom, I'm up and amped and I'm excited and in a great mood when I get to work, man, some of those gains could be, look, I'm going to get a bunch of work done. This is going to be fun. Nothing's going to be dragging. My day's going to be awesome. All it took was like this great espresso before I came to work. And they have customer jobs, right? So my job at work is to do well, is to continue getting paid to do what I do, or move up the chain. Hopefully my boss is listening. Oh, I didn't say that. But look, quite frankly, we all have jobs to do. And in the course of doing those jobs, we are trying to cure pains and add on gains. So we have to understand what our customers are trying to do and how we can help them achieve those two things. And then we have the job. So there are certain jobs that are just kind of standard for humans. One of them is functional. So maybe people need to mow the lawn And that's why they need my super duper THC hand cream. Or maybe they have social jobs that they're trying to do. Maybe they want to look awesome, and that's why they're wearing their wicked cool cannabis t-shirt, something like that. Or maybe it's emotional. Maybe people are using your cannabis products because it relieves anxiety or any of the other peace of mind or just positiveness that might come from your products. And then there's different types of pains. So the undesired pains, right? I don't want to feel pain in my fingers and not be able to move them when I have work to do. Or perhaps people find themselves slowing down or withdrawing from the public. And so they might go for certain cannabis products to get over those obstacles. And one of the most important things as we target, if you will, our customers or decide who might be our archetype customer, we need to kind of rank them as far as, are we relieving the greatest amount of pain for this customer as we are another customer? And that's how we end up deciding, well, this is the group that we really should be going for first as our archetype customer. Okay. Dogs are having some issues behind me. We also have a few gains. Some of those are required. So, if I buy a fancy cell phone, I pretty much expect it to be able to do email, texting, and take pictures as well as, answer a phone call, right? Those are kind of required expected gains. If I'm spending $1,000 on my phone, I hope this thing takes really cool photos. Or something else. I don't know. I'm still not sure why we pay that much for cell phones. Or maybe it's desired. Maybe I really wanted this wicked cool phone because it connects me to my thermostat and all sorts of neat things in my house. And those are the kind of gains that I'm actually willing to maybe pay more money for. So we have to think about what are the gains that our customers are able to get from our products. Testing is a big one to do this, right? You might find your customers, but how do you stay relevant as someone that's making something for them? So testing is a great way, like A/B testing or doing visual cards. But really, the most important thing that I really want everyone to get out of this, how well do you know your customers? That's what this is all about. You have to know your customers and make sure that you are giving them what they desire, not just what you decided to sell. So real quick, some ways of doing this: put yourselves in your customer's shoes, try to understand what they're doing, maybe sit down and just watch people that it might be possible customers, go to your competitors' places. It's nothing mean, just watch what's going on, learn from them. Take notes on what you see these people trying to do. Maybe they're trying to get to work. Maybe they're trying to relax before a concert. What are the pains and gains that they are going through in the course of that action? Now, at the bottom of the Kaufman page where we have the resources, this is the document I upload. Customer archetype profile, print out hundreds of these folks, or keep it digital if you want to save some trees. But as you start your companies, try to fill this form out. Try to see how much you really understand about your customers, and then start thinking of how can I do the best job possible providing what they ask for to them. And with that, I say thank you very much for listening. Ari?
Yeah, just a question we have from Richard, who asks if the customer archetype profile should be geared towards the innovator, sort of at the beginning, or it should be geared towards more of who we expect to come, the early adopters, the later adopters. Who do we gear this to start off with? I thought it was a really great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Absolutely, it should be your first customer. So the archetype really is that first customer, a famous little picture to put in your heads. is if you have a bucket of water and you're standing at a marathon and, you know, everyone's running by, but one person, their hair is on fire. They need that bucket of water more than anybody else that's running at that moment. That's your archetype customer. The person that just has to have your product so much they're willing to pay whatever it takes to drive 4 days for that bucket of water. That's the archetype person. And that's that sort of granular psychology that we have to really understand about who we are selling to, not based on who we want to sell to, but based on who wants what we are selling the most.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Eric. And I'll also share with folks that when I began my cannabis journey in 2013, 2014, the way I sort of chose to get up and running, or to minimize my learning curve and to expose myself to as much information as possible, was at the time traveling to places like Denver and Seattle, which were years ahead of New York, going to as many cannabis conferences as possible, but just hanging out in a few dispensaries in different cities was very informative to think through who the cannabis consumers are and who they will be in the future. And I think when I began my journey, I had I had a stereotype of what a cannabis consumer might look like. But as time went on, it became very clear that, you know, you had a picture of some seniors smoking a joint a few slides ago. And I think what many dispensaries are seeing, and we're certainly seeing this in the New York medical cannabis market, that baby boomers and seniors are a huge segment of the population. Of the customer population, of the patient population. So doing these types of exercises, I think, is exactly the right thing. I see we are joined by my good friend here, Nikki Cateman. Nikki, we are going to take a 5 to 6 minute break. We'll pick it up at 6:17 p.m. And we will be talking to Nikki, representative from UFCW Local 338. And then we will be joined by two Curaleaf executives. So let's take 5 minutes now, and we'll be right back with Nikki. Thank you, folks. Hey, Eric, I'm just going to share my screen now. Do you see my screen?
Yep, it looks perfect.
Awesome. Okay, hold on one sec. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. We're going to jump back into the session 3 here of the Opportunity Grows Cannabis Accelerator. And for those of you who have joined us for sessions 1 or 2, this might be a little repetitive, so my apologies, but want to introduce myself again. I am the founder of Opportunity Grows. I've had the pleasure of serving as the CEO of 2 New York cannabis companies, Fiorello Pharmaceuticals, which is now owned by GTI, and Vireo Health of New York as well. Worked for several years at Vireo, which is a multi-state operator, as the chief operating officer and a director on the public board of Vireo, and really had a great experience doing that. We raised a significant amount of money, both in terms of equity and debt, and in real estate sale leaseback transactions. Vireo now has over 400 employees throughout the cannabis supply chain. I was proud to be involved in forming the New York Medical Cannabis Industry Association. And in a previous life, which seems several previous lives ago, I was in public service. During the Bloomberg administration, I served as New York City's deputy controller, helping to oversee the budget. And beforehand, I was a managing director for a financial services firm. It is shocking when you think about how public opinion has really transformed itself on cannabis, on legalizing cannabis. If you go back a generation, and you ask people, do they think marijuana should be made legal or not? You can see where we were in the late 60s and in the 70s, and how we somehow are now at a place where 2/3 of Americans support the legalization of cannabis. This is no longer a partisan issue. It's not about Democrats. It's not about Republicans. It's not about young people. It's not about older people. Most Americans support legalizing cannabis. And when I say legalizing cannabis, that's for adult use. If you poll, and there's many polls on medical cannabis, should a physician be able to recommend medical cannabis to their patients, 9 out of 10 Americans say yes. Okay. And when we think about how divided American society is, I mean, we're speaking at a time where the United States Senate is exactly split down the middle, and occasionally the vice president, Madam Vice President, needs to cast the deciding vote. Americans are really split on so many issues, but fortunately, public opinion has really been transformed on the issue of cannabis. And this is a map from Rolling Stones magazine, an article entitled United States of Weed, where they just kind of tracked all of the states in the United States. Now there are 18 states and Washington, D.C. that have legalized cannabis for adult use. And you can see that in kind of the dark green states. And here's our home state of New York, but you see really a cluster building with New Jersey, with Massachusetts. And these things often do happen in clusters. You also see the Western cluster over here. And now there are 37 states that have medical use programs. So we're really talking, we've passed the majority of the states. 2/3 of the states have medical cannabis programs. 18 states have adult use programs, and more are coming. So really, the opportunities here for entrepreneurs are really serious opportunities, and New York's market is going to provide tremendous economic opportunities for entrepreneurs. But as we get excited about the economic opportunities for entrepreneurs, it's important to get excited for those entrepreneurial opportunities. It's also important to reflect on how we got here and what has happened over the past generation or so. And there have been profoundly troubling social and economic racial disparities in New York, and unfortunately, New York is not an anomaly in any way. It's not an anomaly. This has happened throughout the country. Different places at different rates, but essentially these trends are present throughout the country. In New York, it was 10x more likely for somebody who's Black or Hispanic compared to a white of being arrested for a marijuana offense, right? So guys like me didn't get arrested for marijuana offenses. People my age who are Black and Hispanic absolutely did. And at a 10x rate. This data comes from the ACLU. The number of Black and Hispanic New Yorkers who were arrested for marijuana offenses approaches 750,000 between 2000 and 2018. That's just a staggering number. I mean, it's hard even to visualize that number. You think about how many people fit in a place like, Yankee Stadium. Right? I mean, this is several X that. And then when you look at ownership, if you look at the ownership, and there are only 10 medical cannabis licenses in New York right now, but when you look at the ownership, there are no minority-owned licenses in New York. The good news is that's about to change. And the MRTA, which we've spoken about in session 1, and Nikki may speak a little bit about it this evening, the MRTA sets an ambitious goal of having 50% of the new licenses going to social equity applicants. And under that social equity umbrella, minority and women-owned businesses are part of that social and economic equity program. So very exciting things are going to happen in New York. Again, the objective of this curriculum is first and foremost to become conversant in the adult use regulations, and then also to get a better picture on the business opportunities throughout the supply chain. We started off with session 1, and if you missed any of the sessions, they're available on YouTube. Just go to the Kaufman Incubator's webpage, the OG Accelerator. You'll be able to view them on YouTube. We started off with law and policy. Great speakers from PharmaCann and Columbia Care. We had an amazing speaker from Vireo Health on cultivation and processing last week, and of course, State Senator Jeremy Cooney. Tonight, our special guest is Nikki, who I'll be introducing in a moment. We will then have 2 amazing senior executives from Curaleaf who lead their retail and marketing efforts, speak with us and share some insights. And then finally, next week, we will focus on fundraising. We will focus on how do you raise capital for cannabis startups. And our special guest will be my former boss, Dr. Kyle Kingsley, who will share some of his amazing stories and experiences with us. So that was the overview of the cannabis curriculum. And it is now my pleasure to introduce somebody who I've worked very closely with over the years, Nikki Cateman. Nikki has an amazingly impressive background working for UFCW, a union with over 13,000 men and women throughout New York and New Jersey. She has been really a key member of the coalition that helped pass the MRTA, or the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. And she was also recently named an Albany Rising Star in the City and State's 40 under 40 list. Nikki, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here this evening. But before we get started, what are you looking forward to on the Thanksgiving dinner table?
I am a big stuffing person.
Nice.
My mom makes my grandmother's recipe, and there's no competing with my mom's stuffing. I'm sorry.
That is absolutely terrific. Nikki, remind me, how many years have you been involved in kind of cannabis advocacy here in New York? Because if you asked me how many years, I would say Nikki's been involved forever, but presumably it started at some point. When did it start?
So it's been since about 2012.
Okay.
And it was working on the Compassionate Care Act. And it was one of the first big pieces of policy that I worked on at Local 338. So it's been almost a decade now that I've been thinking about cannabis policy, and my partner would probably tell you it shows, because I'm sure I talk about it in my sleep on the regular.
So you started in 2012. We're in 2021 now. You started before medical cannabis, before the Compassionate Care Act was passed. The MRTA was passed several months ago now. Did you think it would take about 10 years to get from where we were to where we are now?
I think we sort of thought Compassionate Care Act was passed in 2014, and I think we sort of thought it would be about 10 years to get to the full adult use legalization. It really shouldn't have taken 10 years, right? Because we got serious about this in 2019. But Albany is Albany, and politics happen. So I think it sort of was, in a way, it was on track the way we thought it would be, but also maybe not necessarily at the same time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's, I think it's interesting to think about the fact where going, pre-medical cannabis to where we are now took about a decade. I know there's a lot of participants on this webinar who are frustrated, and understandably so, with the timeline. What's taking the state so long? Why does it take so long? They haven't produced the draft regulations. Where are the applications? Where are the timeline? And certainly it'd be great if the state is building a new agency. It'd be great if they can move more quickly. But I think when you take a step back and you see where we started and where we are now, and you reflect on that decade of time that has elapsed, you sort of think of time a little differently. But Nikki, I would love you for a few minutes if you can talk about working with labor unions. Certainly, the MRTA has several requirements for labor unions, and if you could speak about that and anything else that you think it's really important for our cannabis entrepreneurs to be familiar with in working with labor unions, would be very much welcome.
Absolutely. So first, thank you to you both for having me on, and it's really great. I'm glad I'm getting to be part of this conversation and this great pilot that's happening here. If it's okay, I'd like to just give a little bit of a bigger picture real fast about why we got involved in cannabis policy, and then I'll dive right into the work we're doing post MRTA. So we got involved in cannabis policy quite honestly as a moral duty, right? And that's two tracks. The first track is obviously we care very much about uplifting workers and ensuring that that workers have sustainable wages and benefits, and that we're uplifting people. And we saw what was happening. California was sort of the wild, wild west at the time. People were being paid in product. There were really horrific exploitative practices happening. We wanted to make sure that when New York legalized medical cannabis, that jobs being created were good quality jobs that set people on a pipeline to success and to be able to support themselves and their family. The other piece of this was really the pure moral obligation with medical cannabis. Our colleague at around the same time was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And so we saw the impacts that it had on him, and his doctor had told him, you should get some cannabis. This will help you get through treatments. His wife was an assistant district attorney, and he didn't want to do anything to jeopardize his family. So we saw firsthand the value that medical cannabis would have had for our colleague. And it sort of thrust us into getting involved morally, both in terms of creating good jobs, but also supporting people access medicine. Because at the end of the day, cannabis is medicine. So after the Compassionate Care Act was passed, we continued to be involved in conversations about improving the medical cannabis program. And then, of course, working with a number of different partners to finally get the MRTA passed. And as Avi said, the medical cannabis, the MRTA is centered in social justice and economic opportunity, right? 50% of social equity of licenses have to go to social equity applicants. But when we were talking about social equity, we wanted to make sure that that also applied to workers, and that we were also giving, when we're talking about creating opportunities, that we were doing so for people who are going to be entering the industry as workers, which most folks will be doing so, since the state is expecting 20 to 60,000 jobs. And we want to make sure that folks had access. So in that interim, we've been passed, since between Compassionate Care Act and the MRTA, we've also organized 80% of the industry. So 80% of New York's cannabis workers across the entire supply chain are represented by Local 338. And we're really proud of what we've done. So how did we get to that number? So as was mentioned, and is on the screen, the statute does require all applicants to have a labor peace agreement. It's an ongoing material condition of application. So let me start with what it's not, because I think that's much easier. And I think when people hear labor peace agreement and maybe have never interacted with labor unions, they get really nervous. So what a labor peace agreement is not, it's not a union contract. Nobody's coming in slamming down a document on the table saying this is what you have to comply with. It's also not a document that mandates who you can hire. That's something that I've heard too. Who you hire as an employer is all your choice. And frankly, the only thing we do is encourage you to hire locally and diversely. But what a labor peace agreement is I like to think of it as a relationship building document, but also a document that really uplifts and highlights and amplifies what the National Labor Relations Act says. And what the labor peace agreement does, and we have a standard document. I will share my contact information, or Eric and Ari can share it. And what it's a standard document. It really frames out what that means. So in exchange for the union and the workers giving up their right to engage in strike, boycotts, economic interferences, the employer agrees to remain neutral and will not interfere or retaliate against workers who choose to join a union. But the document goes a little bit beyond that. It also creates some framework for us being able to access and speak to the workers, recognizing that cannabis facilities across the entire supply chain are incredibly secure, but it creates some basic protections for both us and the employer. And so we have that document, and what we've been doing is we've been meeting with different companies already, or who are planning to apply, and we're talking through what these agreements look like, and how we can work together, really, because we are committed to this industry and this industry being a success. So now, what happens after a labor peace agreement is signed? Well, obviously, this is a process. So the workers still, we talk to the workers, and the workers still have to democratically choose to join the union. And that requires having a majority. And when that happens, once it's recognized, and we're the official bargaining unit for the workers, we have what goes into negotiations for what's the next bullet, which is a collective bargaining agreement. And that is really a net negotiation, right? And we have contracts, not just in the cannabis industry, with businesses of all different sizes. So we represent workers at companies that have 2,000 workers, but we also represent businesses that have 12 workers. And we recognize that contracts obviously have to look very different based on the size of the entity, based on finances, based on economic sustainability. So contracts, our priority is obviously workers first, protections, ensuring that they are paid a living wage, that they're compensated fairly, that they have their benefits, but also recognizing we want to do so that, I like to say unions are not in the business of putting businesses out of business. But now, so that's a lot of words, but that's our goal, right? Is we want to make sure that these industries are sustainable, and ultimately we want businesses to grow. We've also worked, partnered with other businesses in different industries where, we've done everything we can to sort of help them expand and grow where possible. So now benefits to workers, right? Very straightforward. Our contracts ensure guaranteed wage increases, paid time off, full family medical health coverage, a retirement incentive, recognizing that because of federal legalities, our members can't be in our pension or an annuity. So we've set up sort of a alternative track on how we can make sure they have retirement opportunities. We also ensure, different on-the-job protections, making sure that they have a voice at work. Now, what is the benefit to the employers, right? So baseline, workers who are happy don't leave their jobs. We've seen turnover drop after, our collective bargaining agreements have gone into place. We've also, in some instances, we've sort of become almost like de facto HR. And we've had, companies come to us and say, we're putting together an employee handbook. What makes sense to put in as a procedure? What should we put in as an SOP? And, we've helped sort of say, this is kind of what you need to have in here to protect both yourself and the workers. So we've almost become sort of this, de facto sort of consulting where we're helping people because it's helpful for our workers. We also act as advocates, right? I am very passionate about the cannabis industry. And part of why we're having these early conversations with potential applicants is when the regulations do come out, we want to make sure that we are another voice advocating for, changes to regulations or uplifting common sense improvements to make sure that there's not an undue burden on business owners that could potentially impact their ability to hire workers and continue to offer good wages and benefits. And the additional piece I will say that we're very proud of is we are an incredibly well-managed health fund. And what that means is we're able to offer health insurance rates to the employer at a cost that is substantially less than what you would find on the market rate. So we're able to offer really good quality health coverage that includes optical and dental and really helps people make sure that they're getting the care they need. We recently had somebody who was diagnosed with cancer and he got top level coverage, right? And that was because he had health insurance. But that also is a cost savings in the long run for the employer as well, right? Because that was a lower rate, but also making sure that that person got better and was able to return to work because he's also very dedicated to the work he does. So we're really excited about starting to meet with prospective applicants. We want to get these relationships off early, make sure we're building trust, mutual trust, and getting ahead of what's expected of while we don't know what the actual applications are going to say just yet. The one thing everyone does need is a labor peace agreement. So we want to make sure we're having as many conversations as possible as far in advance so that everyone has that one thing off their checklist and they can focus on the really hard parts of getting their application complete.
Oh, that was terrific, Nikki. Thank you so much. And I just want to say that I was proud when I was the CEO of Vireo Health of New York to sign the first collective bargaining agreement in the cannabis industry many moons ago with Local 338. And I found you guys to be extraordinary partners. And it really did help with recruitment. It helped with retention, and it also helped reduce operating costs because you guys, with having thousands of members and ensuring them, providing them health insurance and all different types of insurance and retirement plans, really have access to the type of plans and offerings and products that regular cannabis companies don't have access to. And what people in the cannabis industry often find is we pay a premium for pretty much everything, and insurance is certainly one of the things that we pay a premium for. So you guys have been really great partners. I speak from firsthand experience there, and Eric and I will share any information that you would like to provide, tonight's participants with. And again, Nikki, I just want to clarify: is the labor peace agreement optional for participants, or is it mandatory as part of the future application to sign a labor peace agreement?
It is a mandatory requirement for all applicants and ongoing after a license is issued. Okay.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much. A happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, and enjoy the stuffing.
Thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions about this.
Thank you, Nikki. Take care. In a moment, I am going to introduce Tally from Curaleaf, who has joined us. And Eric, I'm going to ask you to, I'm going to stop my share and ask you to drive right now. So let's give you a moment to do that. Perfect. Perfect. Yes, and if you can go to the next slide. Awesome. Thank you. Tally, it is such a pleasure to welcome you here to our Zoom webinar of the OG Cannabis Accelerator. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We're very excited to have you and to have your colleague, Kate, who will be joining us in a little while. But before we get started, what are you looking forward to on the Thanksgiving table?
I'm looking forward to the hopes that my children eat whatever we've made. Would be what I'm looking forward to, and maybe not working.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanksgiving is really one of those days that really it seems that everyone respects, and there's no expectation of work on that day, or at least that's my experience with it, and I hope it extends to you and your family. But Tally, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Curaleaf for helping sponsor this event and really help promote this event and bring so many cannabis entrepreneurs to the table. We're particularly delighted to have you from Curaleaf. I don't know that there is, I'm pretty sure that everyone who is joining us is familiar with Curaleaf. You're one of the largest, if not the largest, U.S. cannabis company, one of the most successful cannabis companies in the United States, if not the world. Tally, you have such an impressive background pre-cannabis and also in the cannabis industry. Just one question to kind of kick off this conversation is, what do your former colleagues at J. Crew and Petco, what do they think of the fact that Tally is now working in the cannabis industry?
Well, I probably would have been voted least likely person to be in the cannabis industry. And I think that's a theme across that and all of my friends growing up. But, I think everyone, to be honest, is really jealous of the opportunity to build an industry, right? To be able to take the lessons from traditional retail and retail in the past and incorporate them now without the legacy and the baggage kind of all of this history. So to really build to just build a space and a channel and an industry that's constantly fast paced and moving is makes them all pretty jealous.
Amazing, amazing. And before we kind of turn it over to you for the more formal part of the presentation, just share a word or two. I'm always fascinated with people's personal journeys. Pre-cannabis, how did you make that change from pre-cannabis to cannabis, and what was that change like, that career change?
Yeah, I think I was in California at Petco when California went adult use and really got a firsthand look of what the industry was like. Previously, all of my experience had been sort of Midwest and Northeast. So really got my first glimpse of the industry. On top of that, I both had my father and my sister both had cancer. And both really, found the benefits of cannabis. So, there was kind of a two-pronged thing that made me interested in the industry. And then, to be totally honest, I got a cold LinkedIn email request saying, "Hey, would you talk to me about cannabis?" Which, you never know what's going to come through that inbox. So and that was from grassroots. So really had a conversation. And I think for me, having been in big retail before, and had a lot of great lessons, but also weren't really growing businesses, the opportunity to be in a space that people are very passionate about, right? Just as people are passionate about their pets and fashion, people are very passionate about cannabis. The opportunity to help people and again, see firsthand how it's really helped members of my family. And really build an industry is what got me there. And I've been in the industry a little bit more than almost 2.5 years, and I've loved every minute.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that, Tally. You're going to talk about retail, and obviously you lead Curaleaf's amazing retail dispensary footprint. Just to let you know, all the Zoom webinar participants have filled out applications, and certainly there are people who are interested in all parts of the supply chain. But the most popular part of the supply chain that folks are interested in is retail dispensary. So there's particular excitement about having you share some of your insights, given your previous background in retail and your current portfolio. So we'll turn it over to you for the presentation, Tally. But again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. So happy to start. I think the biggest thing for everyone to remember, whether it's cannabis retail or is not that different from regular retail, right? There are elements of compliance, right, that are unique, and the regulatory environment is somewhat special, but the fundamentals are the same, right? It's about the customer, it's about the product, it's about your team, and it's how you're going to operate the business. So I'll walk through, give you some tips, things to think about, some insights on how we've thought about it, and then obviously open to some questions while we go through it on each topic to help frame the conversation a bit more. So I think the first thing, and this is the most important part that we all have to be focused on, is the customer, right? This is a customer-driven business. I think that has changed some, right? There was a time in the industry a couple years ago where it was very supply constrained. I would say if you build it, they will come. It is becoming more and more competitive. And so I think it's really important, no matter what you do, is to keep in touch with who your customer is and making sure that you are meeting and exceeding their expectations throughout the customer journey. So the first thing to think about is your location and what the key attributes are of your dispensary, right? And this, again, same rules as it would be as any other retail store, right? Where's your location, right? Is it highly visible? Do you have the traffic there? I think something to remember is the marketing rules, which I know Kate will talk about. the marketing rules around cannabis are much more restrictive. So some of the basics of just visibility, great signage, lots of traffic, and good parking really make a difference in your business. The second piece I would say is think about is your store design. So what is the feeling and flow of the store that you want? I think, you have to keep in mind that most of the customer base and most of the growth are going to be people that are new to the industry, right? So new to this space. So one thing we always look at, and I'm a huge advocate of, is how are we making the retail experience feel familiar to those customers, right? So that it doesn't, there is inherently a piece of the business, from the security, from just the way the exteriors of the building have to be designed, that it can still feel illicit, underground, unknown, because in a lot of cases you can't have windows, things like that. So one of the things we look at is in store design is how are you making it feel warm and welcoming? How are you making someone that's probably brand new to the industry, brand new to the product category, feel comfortable? If it's in a medical space, right? They're going to talk about some parts of their lives that, regular medicine hasn't been able to achieve. They're going to open up. How are you making sure that they're feeling comfortable doing that in that space? And that you're inviting that trust. In addition to store design, the website and your e-commerce site is also really important. Most people, as we all do, right, before we make a purchase, we look online, right? We're looking for information, we're looking for products, we're doing that research. So as you think about not only your customer, your store, and the physical presence, your digital presence is also really important around that. Next is loyalty and CRM, which is customer relationship management. So again, as you think about your customer, is not only are you getting them to purchase once, but how do I continue the relationship? How do I continue the conversation? And how do I ensure that they are loyal to our dispensary, right? Or your dispensary versus another? And this is a big thing in terms of how are you communicating with them? What are you communicating with them? We think a lot about, okay, you're new to this space, you're new to us. How do we bring you on your journey with us, right? How do we talk to you? How do we tell you about, not only educate you on what sales we have, but also, right, educate you on products? How do we connect you to the community? How do we have more of a relationship than just being transactional? Another piece of that for everyone to think about is your loyalty. Do you have a loyalty program, right? So again, if you go to a ton of other retailers, right, everybody, whether it's, hey, I get points, whether I can, I go to the grocery store, I get access to certain sales or discounts if I'm part of that program. Same is very common in cannabis. So one of the pieces to think about is, what do you want that program to be? How do you want to incentivize your customers, and what are those incentives? And then last on the customer front is really your service expectations of your staff, right? So as you think about who your customer is, what their journey is, how do you want to interact with them? It's ensuring also that your team in store aligns with that, right? I think more and more it's so important to have a service-minded team that really understands that relationship, that has great empathy, especially in medical markets where people are really talking about some of the hardest parts of their lives and their pain. And so how do you have a staff that can really relate to that and builds that trust with your customers? Does anyone have questions on customer? I can keep going, but I just figured I'd ask.
I think, Tally, what some entrepreneurs, what some participants had asked, we had other large MSO representatives here from Columbia Care, from PharmaCann, from Vireo. Many of the entrepreneurs on the phone or on the webinar are kind of concerned, how will we compete with a Curaleaf or a Columbia Care or a PharmaCann? Is that even possible? Look at all the amazing things you guys do. How are we going to compete with a massive public company? And I just wonder what kind of thoughts you have on that.
I think, of course, and again, I point to retail, right? right? And take your question of your space, right? I point to apparel retail, right? There's more than enough room in retail for both the big guys and the little guys, right? And I think it's all about, right, a customer is looking at different things. Or, think about coffee shops, right? You've got Starbucks, you've got Dunkin' Donuts, and you've got plenty of independents that have great success and space out there. There are so many customers, there's enough for us to go around. I think the part is you have to define, okay, what's the space? What's your mission? What's the target of your customers? I think, it's very hard if you were running an independent business to say, oh, I'm going to try to be Target. I think that's really a challenge, but you can be really unique and special and really curate that experience to a target set of customers, like a much more identified set of customers, and still be very successful.
I think that's great. That was really helpful. We also have a question from Holly, who wants to know if in the cannabis industry, there are any type of restrictions on the type of loyalty programs that can be offered.
In certain states, there are restrictions around it, but in New York, there aren't, right? That I know of. So it's always good to check. Rules are constantly changing, and each state has their own spin on them. But I would say in general, no. Now there's free product sometimes can be an issue. So I would check the regs carefully, but it's pretty common, I would say, across almost all of our states for us to have a loyalty program and for our competitors to have one also.
And Tally, the questions for you are rolling in, so I'm going to give you one more and then I'll let you proceed. We have a question from Len, who wants to know if smaller dispensaries and independent dispensaries will be able to carry Curaleaf products.
Yeah, of course, right? We have a robust wholesale business, and even today, within most of our states, we sell both Curaleaf, Select, and Grassroots, both in our stores and others. And we buy product from other people, right? So it is everybody can have the assortment that they want, that they feel like matches their customer.
So if I'm a craft grower participating in this program in the future, if I get a craft growing license, I might be able to sell to Curaleaf, and you would carry my craft flower in your Forest Hills dispensary.
100%.
Excellent. Okay. We will try to get to some other questions as we go on, but let's let Tally continue with the presentation.
Yep. So next is product. And I think it's just always important here to think, the right amount of product at the right price at the right time. So there's a few things to look at as you think about the landscape, right? Who are the vendors, right? Understanding the cultivators and building relationships with the salespeople. So whether that's, hey, I'm building in a relationship with the Curaleaf salespeople, the Select salespeople, or any of the other vendors, but it's important to understand what the landscape is. I think then what's next is really your assortment and your inventory planning, right? So how do you want to look at what products you're carrying? And this should go with an overlay of who your customer is, but building a plan around and target inventory levels around your assortment. How much flower, how much vape, how much edibles, how much concentrate? Not only your depth in those, but how many SKUs do you want to have? How many strains of flower do you think are important? As a general statement, I say, flower runs at 50% of your business. So it should really be 50% of your assortment and inventory. Vape is your next largest category. That's probably going to sit there at 30%. And then edible and concentrates are about 10% each. So just to give you some high level things to think about. And then within that, it's really important to think about inventory, right? I always say, I've come from apparel, so that's where I am, but your best sellers are probably black, white, and gray. But if you don't have red, green, orange, and blue on the table, no one's walking over to buy it. And I think that's a way to think about how are you building your assortment, right? You're going to have a breadth of products, but you've got to make sure that, 80% of your business is going to be in those top 20 SKUs. So you have to have the right depth there. And I would think about that and overlay it with who your customer is, because if you're in a predominantly, if you're targeting a female demographic, maybe, right? Because you're getting really targeted in your customer. You might look at skewing that, right? They skew more towards edibles for vapes. If you've got a lot of new customers, you're going to look at your dosing, right? You might want to make sure that you have microdosed edibles, much more so the 2.5 meg, a 5 meg, right? And maybe the 20 meg edible isn't as important. So I think all of that stuff is important as you build kind of your assortment plan. Pricing and promotions can, just like any other business, are really important. So do you have the right price? I encourage everyone to competitive shop, right? Good news is most people's menus are online. So how are you looking at your pricing, and both making sure that you're staying competitive, but also meeting your margin goals? Same with promotions. It's pretty common in the industry to run weekly deals. So what is your promotional structure? What's your cadence? How are you communicating that? And then making sure that you are thinking about what that budget is and how it impacts your margin to meet your profitability goals. Because you sit there, it's very common in the industry to run a keystone margin, which is 50%. So if I buy it for $10, I sell it for $20. But if I'm going to run a discount on it, right, my margin will be less, and making sure that that works in your P&L. And then last but not least is, your key performance indicators and reporting, right? So you go in with a plan, but if anybody knows anything, things change, and your customer is going to tell you what you should do with your business and if you're being right with your choices around product. You need to be sure that you're checking your reporting, and that, hey, I thought flower was going to be 50% of my business. Is it 50% of my business? If it's running 60% of my business, am I adjusting my inventory levels accordingly? If I'm off in some place, if it's edibles and I'm off, do I have the right SKU count? Do I have the right assortment? All of that. But it's really important to monitor your business and make sure that you're checking the actual performance matches what your expectations were and adjusting accordingly. Any product questions?
There is a question about delivery, which I guess is sort of falls into not a product, but a service category. And I'm just wondering what you think about the impact of delivery on cannabis retail. I think there was actually, I saw earlier today, there was a news item about Uber in Canada getting into the cannabis delivery space. Is delivery a threat to cannabis retail, or could it work somehow together with cannabis retail? And I realize this is a broader question in terms of how e-commerce and bricks and mortar retail really work together.
Yeah, look, I think delivery will be an important part. To be honest, it's at least in the Northeast, right? Not in California. It's not on the West Coast. It's not really a huge thing right now. I think that you still have so many people that are new to this space and a constantly changing assortment that people really want conversation, right? Hey, what is this? What's new? Tell me about it. They're really looking for more information than delivery really provides. I think the other piece to consider is, for example, in New York, we can run delivery on our own. It's just with the regulatory environment and sort of the route optimization, it's tough. It's a tough business to be in. I think, getting easier regulations will be helpful there. And, like a sharing version of it, right, where someone can really optimize their route will be helpful at some point, but we're just not there today. So I think it's something that has potential for the industry, and I think it can really help stores and brands reach more customers. But I would say we're still probably a couple years away from it being a big enough thing for us and for the industry.
Thank you.
All right, so team, right? So a happy team drives a positive customer experience, and I think this is something that you cannot take for granted, who your team is and how you're looking at it. So the first part I would say is think about what your labor model is going to be, roles along with full and part-time staff. And here's the thing, retail runs on part-time staff. That is a really common way to run the business, both because of your sales, right? So one part of it is your business is not static during the day. This isn't an office job, right? People come in, you're going to have peaks and valleys. Part-time staff really helps you have that flexibility in scheduling. So being able to schedule, oh, I'm going to schedule you 4 hours in the middle of the day to cover lunch because I get a big spike at that time, or hey, I need to have a ton of people on Friday, not that many people on Sunday, but really going out and thinking about what your full and part-time mix should be based on the hours that you're running and your expectation of sales. And part-time staff is huge for your flexibility, because it's really easy to sit there and say, oh, I don't need you to send people home if that's what you need to do, or to tack on some more hours. So we are a huge proponent of part-time staff. I also think, especially in medical markets where, customer stories and the empathy it takes to have that interaction can be really exhausting to your staff. It's a lot to hear customer after customer, oh, my cancer, my Crohn's, my chronic pain. And I think part-time staff really helps alleviate some of that, right? And brings a freshness and energy into your building. Talent profile. So I think it's really important to think about who's the person, right? What's the experience you want to have in store, and what's the person that can deliver that? Some of the common elements are always going to be, are they empathetic? Are they good listeners, right? Are they great at relating to people? But it's also about sales, right? Are they good at suggesting product? Are they good at thinking about it? What's the chemistry within the building of the group, right? How do you want everyone to look and feel and interact, right, with each other? So I think having a thought up front of what you want that profile to be is really important, and making sure that you hire accordingly. There's a ton of great talent out there, especially coming out of hospitality and other retail businesses. So it's just thinking about, right, what's that customer experience? What are the right parallel industries? And what do I want to create in my building? And making sure you hire to that. Training is super important. And there's several aspects of this, but training, there's both training on the product, right? So are you requiring people to come in with cannabis knowledge? I think it's probably always good to have a base level set of training, right? Whether some version of Cannabis 101, there's several online companies out there that have different modules, but it's really great to kind of make sure everybody has the right vocabulary. The other piece is the compliance and the regulatory part of the cannabis business. That is a huge piece. This is a zero loss business, which is unlike any other retail business out there, right? Other retailers would sit there and say, oh, I got 0.5% shrink. Isn't that great? Because of the way the seed to sale systems are, you need to know where every single piece is. So it's really important that your team is well trained, and not only in the point of sale system, but also how you're running inventory and the various compliance and reporting requirements, especially since a regulator can walk into your building at any time and ask anyone questions. Compensation and benefits, right? This is just, how are you planning your hourly rates? We all see that there's a labor shortage out there. Hourly rates are climbing. So just keeping a pulse on that. Are you handling tips? And how are you dealing with tips? How are you pooling tips? Are you letting people get individual tips? Those are huge sticking points for your team. So it's really important to have a really thought through plan. And then bonuses, right? So how are you going to run an incentive compensation program? If so, to what level? Is it the management team that gets compensated if they, hit certain sales levels? Does it go down to all the way through your bud tenders? How are you going to handle it? Is it an annual bonus, quarterly? I'll let you know, we run on a quarterly bonus system, right? Because the idea is you want to incentivize people in chunks of time that they can manage, and then adjust those expectations as needed. It's pretty common in retail to run on especially at the store level, at a quarterly level, quarterly bonus level. And so that's something I would consider. Security is always important, and this is security procedures, and just in general, making sure that you have de-escalation training for your teams. Again, especially in some cases, people are really emotional. So it's important that your team understands how to diffuse situations, that your team and within the building has the appropriate, right, security personnel there as needed, and knows how to deal with any kind of escalation. And then employee engagement, right? This is your team, right? So how are you engaging them? All the way from, are you doing uniforms, swag, recognition programs, employee of the month, engagement surveys to say, are they excited about your business? Suggestion boxes, all of those things are really important. And again, I think retail is a people business, right? There is product, but it's a people business and it's connections. And if we all think about the retailers that we feel our greatest affinity to, right? Our greatest loyalty is because we have a personal connection, whether it's a salesperson in the store, whether it's, hey, the product really works with my lifestyle, whatever it is, but it is a people business and your team is such an important part of that. And it's really important to get it right. Questions?
There are, but in the interest of time, I know
We'll
we
keep
have
going.
Kate who's waiting to come on next, and we appreciate her patience. So we'll go on to operations. Thank you, Tally.
Yep. Yeah. So last but not least is operations, right? And do you have the infrastructure to built to support your dispensary, and you're driving consistency, standardization, and compliance? So big pieces here. Technology is probably going to be your largest. So what's your point of sale system? What's your e-commerce platform? And how are you going to manage loyalty and CRM, which is email, text messaging? There are lots of solutions out there, some fully integrated solutions, some pieces and parts that you can put together. I think it's important to understand what your resources are and how much you can handle. I think there's enough great ones out there, but it is the cornerstone of how you're going to operate your business. Compliance is next, right? All of you who've written applications know that you have to have a set of standard operating procedures, SOPs, right? That are both show that you are complying with the law and that your team has instruction on what to do in case XYZ happens. So it's really important, right, that you have a great relationship both with your regulators, that you report things on a timely basis, and that you continue to train and reinforce positive behaviors with your team. Communication, right? How are you talking to your team? How are you talking about the business, right? Making sure that you have, whether it's a weekly call, bi-weekly call, but making sure that your team in the store is in touch with what's going on, right? And you have ways to communicate, whether it's updates on a regulatory thing, whether it's technology updates, whether it's making sure everybody knows what goals that they're aiming for. One of the things we have is in every single one of our dispensaries, right? We have 2 backroom boards. One that's a cork board, right? That's full of announcements and key details on how to run the business. And the other one is sales goals by day, right? So that everybody can see sort of where we are in terms of what our sales goals are, what our ATV is, and how we're managing the business. And I recommend that because, again, you're going to have people in and out, especially with part-time labor, definitely different shifts. And so having very structured ways you're communicating with your team is important to keep everybody on the same page. And then troubleshooting. I mean, this is a 24/7 business. I joked obviously in the beginning about Thanksgiving and having the day off. Let's fingers crossed that happens. But making sure that you have a plan for that level of coverage, right? So that that on, a water main breaks, the internet is out. All of those things are debilitating to your business. The state seed to sale system is down, right? Having a plan around that and a clear understanding of who's going to be troubleshooting and when, and making sure you have coverage to ensure continuing operations.
Wow, Tally, that was really unbelievable. We're excited to continue with Kate, but one last question for you. What final words of wisdom would you share with cannabis entrepreneurs whose dream is to open a dispensary in New York? How do they get closer to achieving that goal? How do they learn about the dispensary business?
Well, so I would say visit dispensaries, number one. I think that's really important, is really going in, whether you have your medical card and you can go in New York or you go to adult use states. But I think it's really important to have experienced several different types of dispensaries to help you better refine your vision. And then again, I think the piece for everyone to remember is think about it like any other retail business, right? There's nuances, but if you get caught up in the nuances, it's really easy to lose sight and start questioning what you're doing. So I would sit there and say, when in doubt, what is your best retail experience? Whether it's, hey, I love going to Starbucks, I love going to Target for assortment, whatever it might be. I love to be outside. REI is my favorite store, whatever it might be. But think about what your best retail experiences are, what makes it like that, and use that to guide as you build yours. Because I think at the end of the day, we're all customers, we're all retail customers, and a great experience and great service, no matter what the product we're selling, is important, and that will guide you to success.
Tally, we are deeply grateful for your amazing presentation. We hope you and your children enjoy Thanksgiving with your entire family and truly get a well-deserved day of rest. Thank you again, and thank you to Curaleaf for joining us for this event. Thank you, Tally.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. I now am honored to welcome a colleague of Tally's, Kate Lynch, who is joining us also from Curaleaf. Kate is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Curaleaf. She has a long and impressive career in product marketing, development, and commercialization, and has spent the past 7 years in the cannabis industry. And Kate, is an absolute pleasure to welcome you here this evening.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Welcome,
Hi.
Kate. It is
I
great to have
apologize.
you.
Likewise.
I am sorry that we're running a bit late, but as I asked Tally, what are you looking forward to on the Thanksgiving dinner table, Kate?
I like Tally. I'm looking forward to a quiet day with my daughter and family. I'm actually going to go out for dinner because we hosted a big Friendsgiving this past weekend. So I'm looking forward to not a lot of dishes and a lot of family time.
Oh, that sounds absolutely terrific. Kate, before we jump into things, tell us how you made the career change from pre-cannabis to the cannabis industry. What was your journey there?
So it was actually a little bit haphazard. I had been working at Eastern Mountain Sports, a small outdoor retailer in the Northeast, and a former boss of mine called me up after leaving and asked me if I would help write some medical cannabis applications for a licensure. And I frankly said, what on earth are you talking about? Tell me more about medical cannabis. And I did that. That was my first 6 months, is writing applications for Massachusetts and New York licenses. And quickly was fortunate enough to be part of a startup at that time, which is now a large MSO, running their product and marketing strategies, and have just gotten really passionate about it and have spent the last 7 years just learning and fortunate now to be at Curaleaf.
Amazing. We're absolutely delighted to have you. There's been a lot of excitement for both you and Tally this evening. Pretty much everyone is interested in marketing. I mean, you have to be if you're a cannabis entrepreneur, and there's also a strong interest in retail. But we've really been looking forward to the marketing presentation, and we turn it over to you, Kate.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
So the way we look at marketing at Curaleaf, like Tally's saying, is not too dissimilar to other industries, where it's founded in sort of these core pillars with brand, product, channel, and consumer. This is where we focus a lot of our resources and our energy, is how do we build strong brands, both from a retail and a product, a CPG perspective. And then in doing that, what are those product assortments that ladder up to those brands? And that is really all grounded in the consumer. We've really started to dig deep into consumer insights, segmentation of existing consumers and our target future consumers, looking at both, our data, our sales data, as well as the limited but growing industry data that's out there. So, in doing all of this, we create our brand and product strategies, and then through the channels is where we connect with these consumers. So we have 3 really distinct channels: retail, which is what Tally dove into a lot. We have a wholesale channel, which is doing about 30% of our overall revenue in our B2B business. And then our e-com channel, our websites serve as both a revenue channel. We do just over 50% of our revenue comes through our e-com site. And then it also serves as a large brand awareness, and customer acquisition channel for us. So this is sort of how our team and our resources are broken out. And it's all really fueled by our operations team. And this is something that I would say is critical in all marketing departments, but specifically in cannabis, because it's so regulated and because we operate in many different states with many different regulations, that if you don't have operations, and I'm talking calendar management, spreadsheets, regulatory systems in place, it's really hard to be effective in execution. So one thing that we've done very recently is put operations at the core of what we do. And I would strongly recommend this so that you can really optimize your brand, product, and consumer strategies.
So Kate, 50% of revenues are coming from the e-commerce channel?
So over 50%. And by that, I mean that, as Tally mentioned, a lot of folks' first stop is the website. They're Googling cannabis. How do I get cannabis? How do I get a card? They're finding through some of our endemics like Leafly and Weed Maps, sort of the local store to them or what store is relevant to them. And then in many of our states, they're able to either place an order for pickup at the store or for delivery. So a lot of our first touch, and yes, I'm ready to make a purchase, they can't actually transact online. They have to do that at the store, but they are committing to that purchase through our web channels.
And which does Curaleaf have its own e-com platform, or does it use a third party for that? And if so, which one?
So we use third party systems. I think, and this was predating me. Maybe Tally can speak into it a little bit, but I think we've thought about building systems, but we realized that we aren't necessarily a tech company. We are a cannabis company through and through. So we really look to leverage best in class, either cannabis or non-cannabis off the shelf systems. And so we're in the process of really consolidating and centralizing as we've acquired multiple companies over the years. But we are, and again, Tally can weigh in here, but we're really looking to leverage best in class tech systems to fuel what we're doing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great solutions out there. Dutchie, iHeart, Jane are two great ones that are, and they're available to any retailer, right? And again, I think as Kate said, to a degree, some of this is leverage your strengths, right? And figure out where is the best to outsource, right? Where are the solutions? And in that case, just like anyone, right? We're not a tech company. So what's the best solution for us that's going to give our customer what they want and the access that they need, and the information that they want at the right time?
Thank you.
So I would say something that's a bit more unique to our world, certainly, not strictly unique to us, but we are faced with a lot of complexity of regulations, and mainly because we operate in many different states. We're looking at how do we build our business that is compliant within multiple states, but also is a national business, which we're trying to run. So you see on the right here, just an example of state level regulations as it pertains to product and packaging, for example. These are all things that you have to think through before you were to go to launch a product, and get approval from the state months in advance, in some cases, before launching. And then on the left is just sort of the challenges we face from a marketing standpoint. Search engines are not super fond of cannabis. There's ways to get creative, but we have to be very, very careful in terms of how we talk about our business and our products on these search engines, which we definitely acknowledge is the #1 traffic driver to our sites and to our retail stores. There's no advertising currently through social and search engine channels. Social media channels, we certainly are present, but we have to be very careful. There are definitely algorithms that are trying to trip us all up. And so, it's more about community engagement, less about product and promotion, as much as we do want to launch new products. And through our social channels, we definitely have to be very, very careful. You can spend months and years building an Instagram following, for example, of hundreds and thousands of people, and in a day get shut down. So we're very, very cautious of our social media strategy, and are learning along the way. We do have and we're building a CBD business. And CBD is much more friendly when it comes to these channels, hemp derived, I should say. So we're looking at how we can sort of build a symbiotic relationship between our hemp business and our THC business to build awareness around the industry in general, but while staying compliant, both within the state regulations, as well as some of these social media and search engine channels. And as noted here, there's a lot of research that has been and continues to be done around the efficacy of these products, but in no way can we make claims around what they can do. We like to encourage folks to share their stories, which if you see our backdrops, it says iCannabis, and I'll speak into that a little bit. But when it comes to making claims around the efficacy and the benefits of these products, we have to be very, very careful.
So Kate, like other cannabis companies, I assume this is a true statement, Curaleaf and other regulated cannabis companies for their THC businesses, you're not running Facebook ads, you're not running Instagram ads. That whole channel, that advertising channel is just not available to you.
Correct. We're staying on top of it all the time. We can be present on those channels, but in terms of buying ad placements on those channels, we are not currently permitted to do that.
And 50% of your revenues are still coming from e-com. So imagine what it would look like if you were able to advertise like a traditional retailer was.
Absolutely. And that, that's, we are in 23 different states. So it's certainly offset by some more of the adult use markets that we're in versus the medical markets.
Sure.
But there's a lot of education to be had, and, props to Leafly and Weed Maps and some of the early adopters of this space and educators in this space, because people can do a lot of research. And in more of the adult use markets, I think there's a lot more comfort in going direct to purchase with that information available. Whereas in some of our medical markets, as Tally mentioned, there needs to be that face-to-face conversation and that sort of nurturing through, what is this? What am I doing? How can this help me? Where, we can't make those statements and have those conversations online.
Thank you.
So these are just, ways in which, again, not too dissimilar to non-cannabis businesses, ways in which we connect with our consumers. There are key KPIs that Tally spoke into that we look at. These are some of the big ones. So new consumers into our business, and ways in which we can do that is through community outreach in medical markets like New York. Physician outreach, oftentimes a patient's first stop is with their physician or within their physician network to learn about the program and get a card. So connecting with those physicians has been extremely advantageous to referrals into our business. Local events is important, national events as well. And then advertising where we can do it. There are, as some of you have seen, there are out-of-home placements, some of which we've placed. There are some traditional radio and TV spots that we can place, but we have to be very careful. One thing I'm working on with my team is I do find it hard to think that there's a strong conversion from an out-of-home placement to a sale, because there's so many stops in between a billboard and actually making a purchase that somebody has to make. You have to go to a doctor, you have to get a card. So we're a little cautious on the more traditional advertising, but certainly the digital advertising space in the endemics and some of the other channels that allow it is where we're looking to spend more of our resources. And then word of mouth is one of the largest channels of new customer acquisition. So referrals, if you trust somebody and somebody's saying this is for you for whatever reason, you're going to likely listen to them. So the more nurturing of our existing customers to refer their friends and family to us is something of serious interest to us. And then conversion, as I mentioned, e-com is a huge channel for us. So making sure that we're optimizing our content, our education through our e-com sites. Again, digital advertising, as I mentioned, we can target through some channels that allow it, people that are searching for cannabis or for need states that cannabis we think can address, whether it is, some of the need states that I won't mention, but the big ones that we all know that cannabis is out there to help you with. And then our direct channels, so email and SMS are big ones for us. We continue to build our databases across email and text messaging, and are getting better at targeting. We find if we sort of fire hose a message out, it's not as effective as if we were to be able to segment our consumers based on either their purchase behavior or what they have flagged as what they're interested in. But we continue to nurture and grow those channels. And then point of sale, as Tally mentioned, that in-store experience. We have all different types of people and need states that come into our stores from, these are just a couple of messages that we have sent out, but a very, very medical population to somebody who may be looking for, a more legal and higher quality solution for their cannabis products. So if you can imagine treating those people within the store appropriately and relevantly, that is done through, most importantly, the customer service through Tally's team, but also how we message products and our services within our store. And then I'd say probably the most important thing we're focused on in 2022 is our CRM and loyalty programs. Once we get that customer in the door, how do we keep them? How do we nurture them? How do we encourage them to share their experiences and bring their friends and family into the door? And social media, given the restrictions on social media, we see it as mainly a loyalty channel. Once we have a follower, we can connect with them. I don't think we're looking without advertisement and a lot of sort of free-flowing conversation on social. We're really just looking to nurture that community and have them grow. We're not looking to convert new consumers through social media, but just, increase loyalty. And I touched on a lot of this. iCannabis is something that we're really excited and proud about. Essentially, it's a movement, a platform that we launched mid-summer of this past year. And really what it is, it's a platform for us to let people share their stories around cannabis, whether it's the use of cannabis, education around cannabis, employment within cannabis. We are trying to figure out a compliant, very, very friendly way to have people share their stories. So if you go on our website, there's over 400 stories that we've published. Some of them are our own employees, some of them are maybe friends and families of yours, but people that are really appreciative of the opportunity to share. And you will see that we've curated a lot of the messaging because we have to be compliant, like I said, around claims. But there's some powerful stories in there. We'll be publishing some video content, but I feel as this is the best way to bring new consumers into the space, is to hear people, on a human level talk about why cannabis for them, hence the iCannabis. And we feel as though this is sort of our way to be able to talk about the transparency around the plant and the product and the quality and bring an authentic voice to the table. This isn't necessarily, from our perspective, an advertising campaign as much it is a testimonial campaign and just a platform for everybody to spread the word for Curaleaf and everybody else out there who's trying to, build a reputation and just provide accessibility to cannabis to everybody. Education is a huge piece. Tally has an incredible team of educators. So when you walk in that door, you can learn, again, whether you just want to buy a product that you already know you want, or you need to learn what the cannabis really is and what are the products we offer. Education is a huge pillar. And then value, value both in quality and price is something that we're striving for with our products. 7, 8 years ago when I got into this space, as Tally, I think, said, if you could grow it and put it on the shelf, you could sell it. And now it's not that easy. There's way more categories. The flower category is diminishing a bit as other sort of manufactured products are coming on the shelf. And there's a lot more education and competitive, ness out there. So I think really providing that value both in the education, the service, and the high quality products at a good price, because this is not covered by insurance. And a lot of people are using this the way that they would use other products that is covered by insurance. And then most importantly, sort of in our space in marketing and in product is using data to drive our decisions. So we're constantly looking at data and measuring the results. We're not great at it yet, but we're really trying to ground everything that we do in data. So some of our key KPIs that we look at, as I mentioned, new customer traffic, the frequency of consumers. Sometimes it's much more expensive to get a new consumer in the door than it is to keep them. So how can we keep them coming in at a higher frequency? How much do they spend when they come in? You could tweak that by $2 to $5, and that could make all the difference in the world. And like I said, their loyalty, both in their own purchase behavior as well as referring their friends and family. In driving these metrics, we look at key marketing metrics. So website traffic, website conversion. A couple screenshots here is some of the dashboards we look at on any given day or week to see how we're performing online. We look at the same type of metrics in terms of our email open rates, click-through rates, conversion, and same with text messaging. I will say text messaging has been a bit of a challenge because some of those mobile providers aren't as cannabis friendly either. So, we'll look at a send in New York, for example, and we'll have 90% receipt rate on, let's say, Verizon and AT&T, and we'll have a 50% receipt rate on T-Mobile. And for whatever reason, T-Mobile decided to block all those messages that particular week. So while we might rely on any given channel on any given week, we have to be nimble and look at those data points so that we understand what's going on with the business, because people can trip us up all the time.
And that's why I'm keeping my Verizon phone right here. Forget about T-Mobile if they don't allow cannabis messages. But that was absolutely terrific, Kate. I really appreciate that. Just some very quick questions which are rolling in for you before we adjourn. I want to be sensitive to your time, of course, and to all of our participants. We have a question from Darian about some new packaging requirements in New York, or at least a proposal to use biodegradable hemp packaging. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't have necessarily thoughts on the specific regulation. I can tell you thoughts on just packaging standards and quality. We talk about this all of the time.
Yes.
We are striving for a much more responsible, sustainable platform when it comes to packaging. We are also striving for that value that I spoke about in terms of the price that we offer, and packaging is a huge part of the cost of goods that we see. So it is a constant battle of brand in terms of how the look and the feel that packaging is, the sustainability of that packaging, and then the price that we have to offer the consumer. And oftentimes, unfortunately, the more sustainable, the more expensive packaging is. I will tell you, we have one of the most greatest packaging vendors in the industry. If anyone needs a referral, I'm happy to send them to him. But they are constantly looking at the balance of sustainability and cost. So
amazing.
We're on it, but we're not necessarily there yet.
Amazing. Thank you. We have a question from Len. What % of customers do you believe begin their journey through the CBD product category rather than THC?
That is a fantastic question, and one that we're actually looking to really hone in on as we spin up our CBD business again. I will say anecdotally, and I don't have a statistic for you, but if you're open to the cannabis plant, whether it's a high CBD or a high THC or somewhere in between, or any other minor cannabinoid, I would say that you have a higher propensity to adopt, let's say, a THC product. If you're using CBD in your daily wellness and somebody's like, hey, you want a great solution for sleep. I should not say that, but a great potential solution for sleep. Why don't you try a higher dose of, let's say, CBN or THC? So we are looking at the hemp business as sort of the Trojan horse to get people into the THC business. Because we are able to access them through all the mainstream, like food, drug, mass channels. And I think if they become comfortable with this plant featuring these cannabinoids, they might be more comfortable with testing out maybe a low dose to THC to start. But I don't have a statistic. I would love to have that.
Appreciate that. And then a question from Richard in New York, does Curaleaf sell flower in glass or in plastic, or in what form does Curaleaf sell flower in New York?
Packaging formatted is in plastic.
Okay. And
regulatory wise, it has to be an opaque container in New York. So that's part of it.
Can and we had this question a couple times, in the future, will social equity dispensaries and other independent dispensaries that open be able to purchase Curaleaf cannabis products wholesale and sell them in their dispensaries?
Yeah, I mean, Tally, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that the case today?
Yep. So our wholesale team, anyone could place an order today for Curaleaf Select product.
Excellent. And Kate, final question for you. What final words of wisdom do you have to cannabis entrepreneurs at the beginning of their journey? You shared with us your journey a few years ago. We started with the medical cannabis applications in a few states. Somebody starting out now whose dream it is to open a dispensary or start their own craft grow. Well, what should they be thinking? What advice do you have for them?
I mean, I guess I would say, and I think about this a lot when I'm sort of building my teams, is stay humble and stay nimble. I mean, one thing I've said all along is there are no experts in this space, and I put myself in that same bucket. One day you think you know what's going on, and the next day the world completely changes, and you have to build that expertise, within that moment, but you also have to be totally open and willing to pivot on a dime to capitalize on what's next. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, I will say it's extremely rewarding. You're making history, so get excited about that, but definitely stay humble and be ready to be very agile, because that is what this industry is going to expect of you.
Wow. Those are some great words of advice. Kate, Tally, and to the entire Curaleaf family, we're deeply grateful for you joining us this evening and for sharing your expertise. And we do regard you both as experts, and we really appreciate your participation in the program. And this webinar will be available on YouTube. These slides will also be available on Binghamton University's webpage for the Kaufman Incubator. And Kate and Tally, again, thank you so much for your time. You are absolutely terrific, and we truly appreciate you joining us on Thanksgiving Eve here.
Thank you
Thanks
so much
for having us. It was great.
Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy
Take care.
Thanksgiving.
We will see everybody next Tuesday. Our final session will focus on fundraising in the cannabis industry. We'll be joined by Dr. Kyle Kingsley from Vireo Health, from Goodness Growth Holdings. We'll be joined by Gene Sullivan, who has an amazing background in private equity. And we will also be joined by Peter Prevost, who is a CPA and will take us through some of the financial management techniques of cannabis businesses. So thank you again for joining us. Eric, thank you, and to the Kaufman Incubator and Binghamton University for putting this together. And we look forward to seeing everybody here for our final and fourth and last session next Tuesday, November 30th at 5:30 p.m. Until then, happy Thanksgiving to you and your families. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Eat well.